They called for wheelchair assistance the moment I stepped off the escalator on my own 2 feet on my 78th birthday. Name's May, retired flight instructor, and the peppermint coffee tasted like lukewarm pity under those buzzing fluorescent lights. Carried my old Air Force duffel like always. So why did everyone still assume I needed help? Ever been mistaken for less than you are? Richmond International Airport was already buzzing on that frosty December Saturday. Outside, a soft layer of snow clung to the sidewalks, while inside warm, instrumental Christmas music played over the PA system. Rolling suitcases squeaked across polished floors. A young boy shrieked near gate C3. Nobody paid much attention to the woman who had just stepped up to the check-in counter with a frayed duffel bag slung over her shoulder. May Thomas stood patiently, her gloved hands gripping the strap of the faded green bag. It bore an old Air Force patch and a faint set of initials MET. Her boots were plain, her wool coat practical, and her posture quietly composed. "Good morning, ma'am," chirped the airline agent Karen, according to her name tag. She offered a rehearsed smile while tapping on her keyboard. "Boarding pass and ID, please." "Do you need wheelchair assistance today, hon?" May gave a small shake of her head. "No, ma'am. I'm good on my own. Thank you kindly." Karen blinked, caught off guard for half a second. "Alrighty, well, your gate's in Concourse A, straight ahead and to the left. Big green signs, can't miss 'em." May nodded, took the boarding pass with both hands, and turned without another word. As she walked away, she pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A single photo appeared: 3 young men in flight suits, smiling wide, standing beside a younger version of herself in uniform. Her thumb hovered over the screen before she tucked the phone away again. She found a spot in the waiting area near a window, where the snow outside had started falling more steadily. May lowered her bag, took out a small silver thermos, and poured a bit of black coffee into its lid. The smell was strong and clean. She sipped slowly, watching the travelers around her with mild interest. A few seats down, an older man, white hair blazer, slightly too big on him, fumbled with a shiny red gift bag. He was trying to attach a silver ribbon, but couldn't quite manage the bow. May stood. "Let me help you with that." The man looked up, smiling with relief. "Well, thank you. My fingers don't work like they used to. It's for my granddaughter." May tied the bow quickly, precisely, like someone who had done it 100 times. "I'm Oliver," he said, adjusting the bag once she handed it back. "Flying to Georgia to see the family. First time traveling since before all the nonsense." May gave a soft chuckle. "It's good to go if you can." He paused. "You headed somewhere special, just a personal trip," May replied. "Not going home?" "Not exactly." Oliver looked like he might press, but May's eyes had already returned to her book. He didn't mind. A few minutes later, he stood up again and walked over, holding out a gingerbread cookie. "Homemade. You sure you don't want one?" May looked at the cookie, smiled gently. "Not till after takeoff." Oliver nodded, respecting the boundary. He sat back down and slowly unwrapped one for himself. Across the aisle, an elderly woman in a wheelchair dropped her boarding pass. It fluttered under her seat. She reached awkwardly, the wheels squeaking beneath her. May noticed. She set her book aside, walked over, bent down, and retrieved the pass. "Here you go, ma'am." "Oh, thank you. I was afraid I'd lost it," the woman said with visible relief. May gave a polite nod, steadying the armrest before returning to her seat. She picked up her paperback again, but didn't turn the page. Back at the counter, Karen was chatting with a younger coworker just behind a support column. As May walked past on her way to the restroom, she caught a whisper. "They really shouldn't travel alone at that age," Karen muttered. "If something happens..." May didn't stop. She didn't flinch. She adjusted her scarf and kept walking, posture straight as a pin. When she came back to her seat, Oliver had dozed off. May pulled out her phone once more. A new message lit up the screen: cleared runway tomorrow. Call me if you reconsider. Leighton. May stared at it for a long moment. Then she set the phone down on the seat beside her, exhaled through her nose, and reached for her book again. Outside the terminal window, snowflakes danced against the glass. By late morning, the terminal was warmer, the light outside soft and golden, melting patches of snow into puddles along the taxiway. Inside Gate B5, travelers shuffled with candy cane-striped luggage, and kids in Santa hats giggled as they chased one another around the chairs. A small booth off to the side, decorated with red and gold tinsel, bore a handwritten sign: "Veterans come warm up. Free coffee and thanks." May Thomas sat quietly beneath the fluorescent lighting, hands folded in her lap duffel bag, tucked neatly under her feet. She glanced at the wall clock above the gate desk. Its face was shaped like an old propeller plane. Oliver noticed her gaze. "You watching the clock or the plane?" he asked, settling next to her with a slow sigh. May gave a gentle smile. "There's always time to call someone, until there isn't." Oliver looked down. He rubbed his temple. "You'd think 5 years would be long enough for two stubborn people to cool off. But somehow it gets harder the longer you wait." "You could still call," May said simply. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and thumbed through a few contacts. One name hovered at the top: Lisa Brent, before he let the screen go dark again. The rhythm of the terminal shifted as two pilots entered the gate area, laughing over some shared joke. One, slightly older, peeled off to check something at the counter. The other, mid to late 30s, square jaw, immaculate uniform, walked with the kind of confidence that didn't pause for anyone. Captain Briggs. May was standing nearby, glancing at the screen that listed departures. Her finger hovered near Colorado Springs. Briggs barely slowed as he passed. "We'll call when we're ready, ma'am," he said, tone clipped, but polite enough. May looked up at him for only a second. "Appreciate it." Briggs had already turned back to his colleague, muttering something about delays and passengers who asked the same questions 10 different ways. He didn't look back, but his voice carried. "Civilians love to ask dumb questions when they're bored." May's face remained placid. If she heard him, she didn't show it. Instead, she walked toward the care package booth, where a volunteer in a red vest was offering coffee with a peppermint stir stick. "Morning," the volunteer said, perking up. Veteran May gave a small nod. "Hot coffee, black." "You read minds, Ms. Jean." "Retired nurse. 3rd Christmas volunteering here. You wear your pin honest, I'll tell you that." Jean handed over a steaming cup. "That's the real Air Force insignia, isn't it? You don't see those much." "Not these days," May replied, accepting the cup with a steady hand. Jean leaned in just a bit. "I knew a few WF girls back in the 60s. Sharp ladies. Real backbone." May's smile deepened but didn't widen. "We had our moments." Across the terminal, Briggs's laugh rang out again. He was recounting something to another crew member, mimicking an older woman's voice, asking, "Is this the plane to Colorado?" complete with a dramatic shrug. Jean followed May's gaze. "Lot of bark on that one," she muttered, nodding toward Briggs. "He'll learn," May said, sipping her coffee. Or not. Back at the gate, Oliver was scrolling his phone again. Jean noticed. "Call not going through, no," he said a little too fast. "I mean, yes. I mean, she's probably busy." May walked back and sat beside him. She didn't comment. Instead, she pulled out a handkerchief and gently wiped a smudge from her coffee lid. I used to know someone, she said after a pause, who always answered after the third ring. Then one day they didn't. Oliver looked at her sideways. You never got to fix it? May shook her head. No. Silence stretched. In the distance, another pilot made an announcement for boarding Group A for a different flight. Families began to gather their things. Briggs walked past the care booth again and paused when he caught sight of May's pin. Those are sold online nowadays, he commented to Jean, not even lowering his voice. Anyone can wear 'em. Jean's hands froze mid-coffee pour. May didn't react. She took another sip, eyes drifting to the window. A military transport rumbled down the runway, then climbed into the pale winter sky with a roar. She watched it for a long moment, then turned back to Oliver. I taught one of them to fly, that she said softly. Briggs looked over, but May was already back to her book. Jean raised an eyebrow, handed over another cup of coffee, and muttered to herself. Damn right she did. The snow had started again, soft and steady against the wide airport windows. Gate B5 had quieted to a hum. Travelers hunched into their coats or scrolled their phones, glancing at the flickering departure board, as if it might change its mind. May Thomas sat still upright, her hands folded over her lap. She glanced down at her wristwatch, a worn, silver-faced timepiece with faded military etching along the edge. It still ticked perfectly. She reached for her duffel, adjusted the frayed strap so it lay flat beneath her chair, and exhaled quietly. Near the counter, Karen stood beside Captain Briggs, both sipping from airport paper cups. She wanted to visit the flight deck, Karen said in a hushed voice, trying not to laugh. Briggs raised an eyebrow. She asked you that? Karen nodded. Said something about seeing the cockpit again. Briggs snorted. Probably a retired stewardess, huh? Behind them crouched near a wall panel Jason. The maintenance tech paused from adjusting the jetway control box. He looked up briefly at the sound of Briggs's voice, then turned back to his tablet. His brow furrowed. She looks familiar, Jason murmured under his breath, mostly to himself. Swear I saw her in a training module once. Across the waiting area, Oliver fidgeted with his phone and sighed. No juice, May asked without looking. Oliver chuckled. Battery's worse than my knees. Wall plug's too far. May stood without a word, retrieved a charging bank from her bag, and passed it to him. The cord extended from her pocket like she'd expected the request. Much obliged, Oliver said. Hey, do you know a name? Leighton Briggs said it on the phone earlier. Something about weather clearance and a callback. May didn't answer, but her hand twitched slightly around the coffee cup in her lap. Just funny that name, Oliver continued. I worked admin under a General Leighton. Years back, Fort Carson. Kind of voice that made a conference room go silent. May didn't speak. She just stared out the window as a faint gust of snow gusted sideways across the tarmac. Then something slid out from her duffel. Oliver leaned forward and picked it up, a stiff ivory envelope, military-grade paper, the kind that doesn't fold by accident. Across the front, in sharp black ink, it read, Chief M.E. Thomas, Confidential Clearance Review. A signature in the corner caught Oliver's eye. He blinked. Leighton, he whispered. That's his handwriting. May took the envelope gently from his hand, refolded it in thirds, and slipped it back into her bag. She said nothing. Oliver stared at her for a beat. Chief, he muttered. Chief Thomas. Oh my. Nearby Jason's tablet pinged. He glanced down at May, looked again, and pulled out his phone. He typed a quick message, his thumbs moving faster with each word. Across the terminal, an overhead voice called, Attention passengers for Flight 317 to Colorado Springs, minor crew delay due to rerouting. Thank you for your patience. Briggs walked up from the gate desk, visibly annoyed. One of our co-pilots got rerouted up to Chicago, he told Karen. Stuck waiting for a stand-in from Norfolk. At this rate, we'll be handing out boarding passes with fruitcake. Jason looked up from his phone. You need someone jump-seated with FAA clearance. Briggs scoffed. Yeah, unless someone here's certified and magically free on Christmas Eve. Jason shrugged, then nodded toward May. Well, if I'm right, she probably logged more flight hours than you did last year. Briggs followed his gaze, barked a short laugh. What's she gonna do, knit us to Denver? Karen chuckled nervously. Jason didn't laugh. May stood slowly, walked toward the window, coffee still in hand. Outside, the wind kicked up small flurries along the edges of the runway. A large C-130 transport taxied into view lights, blinking like distant stars. She stared at it for a long moment, then said softly without turning, I've launched in worse. The words hung in the air like frost. Briggs looked unsettled, just slightly. Jason raised an eyebrow, clearly pleased with himself. Oliver sat back, phone still in hand but forgotten. May took one last sip of her coffee and returned to her seat. Stillness followed her like a trailing shadow. Jason's phone buzzed again. He checked it, nodded once to himself, and began typing quickly. By early evening, the snow had turned heavy, blanketing the tarmac outside in a smooth layer of white. The airport had quieted, less bustling, more murmurs and yawns. Inside the USO lounge at Richmond Airport, soft lighting glowed gold against wood paneling. A small Christmas tree blinked quietly in the corner. On a nearby flat screen, the news anchor spoke of widespread weather delays stretching across the East Coast. May sat by the wide front window, a cup of cocoa warming both her hands. The steam curled gently in the air, and tiny marshmallows floated at the top, slowly dissolving. Silent Night drifted from an unseen speaker, played gently on piano and strings. Jason appeared at the door, tapping lightly on the frame. Ma'am, he said, voice low. There's a call for you. Lines patched into the staff office. They said it's important. May didn't look surprised. She set her cocoa down, stood slowly, and followed him past the front desk and through a hallway marked Staff Only. Jason waited outside. Inside the small office, she picked up the old landline receiver. You always did hate snow, said the voice on the other end, deep, precise, and unmistakably familiar. May's lips lifted slightly. You always did prefer palm trees. General Layton chuckled. Still got that bite. I heard you've been keeping quiet out there. Wasn't hiding, May said evenly. Just not announcing myself either. Well, too bad. Word travels when the airport tech recognizes you before your old CO does. He paused. You're still cleared. We can have you in Colorado Springs by 0800 tomorrow. Ceremony kicks off at 0900 sharp. The pilots are asking if you'll be there. May didn't respond right away. She looked out the narrow window at the snow thickening under the terminal floodlights. I'll think about it. That's all I ask, Layton replied. His tone softened. You landed a jet with a busted rudder at 28 May. You've earned the right to say no, but I figured you might want to see what came of those cadets you trained. Another silence. I'll keep the runway clear, he said. The line clicked off. Back in the lounge, Oliver looked up as May re-entered. She wasn't smiling exactly, but something about her looked lighter, like a tension in her shoulders had eased. You okay? He asked. May picked up her cocoa and took a long sip. Better than most Decembers. He hesitated. I almost called her. May raised an eyebrow. My daughter Oliver clarified. I found her number, pulled it up. Then I stared at the screen until it timed out. May didn't scold or encourage. She simply offered, courage doesn't always show up loud. Oliver nodded slowly, tucked the phone back into his pocket. Just then, a young assistant in airport uniform stepped inside the lounge. Natalie, no older than 23, face flushed from the cold. "Sorry," she said, "they said there's cocoa here." Jason pointed toward the counter. Natalie poured herself a cup, then paused. Her eyes drifted to the wall where a framed plaque hung just above the coat rack. She stepped closer. It read, Chief May E. Thomas, Chief Flight Instructor, United States Air Force, 1981. 5 steady hands, quiet skies. Natalie turned her face a mixture of awe and confusion. "Is that?" May gave a single nod, then turned back to the window. The lounge door opened again. Briggs stepped in, looking slightly worn. He was rubbing his hands together from the cold, barely glancing around until his eyes landed on the plaque. He froze. The name sank in before the face registered. He looked toward May, then back at the wall. Jason watched it happen, the slow recognition, the dawning discomfort. Briggs swallowed and adjusted his jacket. May rose from her chair, collected her bag, and walked past him without breaking stride. As she neared, she leaned slightly and murmured, "Try not to underestimate your passengers again." She didn't wait for a response. Briggs stood silent, the only sound the soft rustle of her duffel and the clink of marshmallow spoon in her empty mug. Back at her gate, the overhead voice began its final boarding call. The snow outside came down heavier now, coating the runways and taxiways in thick, unbroken white. From inside the small cafe tucked near Gate B5, everything beyond the glass looked like a frozen world. Inside, however, the air was warm and golden, the overhead lights casting soft pools of light across polished tile. The scent of cinnamon rolls and fresh brewed coffee hung thick and comforting in the air. May Thomas and Oliver Brent sat side by side at a small round table near a space heater. Oliver's coat lay folded on the back of his chair, and his fingers wrapped around a warm mug, though it wasn't doing much to calm the tremble in his hands. "It's not the cold," he muttered, eyes flicking toward the phone on the table. May smiled gently. "I know." For a moment they just listened. The cafe's television flickered above them, sound-off captions on. It showed a montage of stranded travelers, storm warnings, and briefly a young Air Force cadet saluting smartly as she stepped off a transport. May's gaze lingered for a second. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Did you miss it?" Oliver asked. May tilted her head. "The flying, the structure, the purpose." May wrapped her hands around her own cocoa mug, still half full. "I never left it," she said quietly, "even when I did." She looked out the window past the reflection of orange bulbs and holiday garlands. The skies don't hold you. They remind you how small everything else is. That's where the freedom comes from. Oliver exhaled, nodded, and reached for the phone again. He stared at the screen. One thumb hovered over his daughter's name. "Time doesn't wait for us," May said gently. "It only listens once." He pressed the button. It rang once, then twice, a third time. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a voice came through. Dad Oliver's breath caught. Sarah, a pause. Then cautiously, "Yeah, it's me." Silence. Then a laugh, nervous, thin, but real. "I didn't think you'd call," she said. "I didn't think I could," he answered, voice breaking just slightly. May stood quietly and stepped away, giving him space. She moved toward the cafe counter where Natalie was chatting with the barista. "You want anything else, ma'am?" Natalie asked, turning. May glanced at the cinnamon rolls cooling in the glass case. "Smells better than most runways I've landed on." Natalie smiled. We had one cancellation, but a seat opened up on the 9:15 to Colorado Springs. A military standby cleared it for you. May considered the offer. Appreciate it, she said. But some things are more important than getting there first. Natalie nodded, understanding more than her age might suggest. Across the room, Karen approached slowly. She no longer had her clipboard, just a styrofoam cup in her hands. I saw the plaque, Karen said quietly. May waited. I didn't know. About you. May raised an eyebrow, but her expression was kind. Karen looked down. Thank you for earlier. You didn't have to step in, but you did. May said nothing for a moment, then simply replied, We all need reminders, even the confident ones. Back at the table, Oliver was laughing now. The sound was warm, cracked at the edges, but full of light. Well, I can bring the gingerbread, he was saying. Don't tell your mother's recipe, I outdid her. May smiled to herself and walked over slowly. Oliver ended the call, wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. She invited me for Christmas dinner, he said, voice thick. May gave a simple nod. He stood, and before she could react, pulled her into a tight, grateful hug. If not for you, I'd be spending another Christmas alone, he said. May held the moment, then stepped back, adjusting her scarf. The television above flickered again, footage now of snow being cleared from Denver runways. In the corner of the screen, a news ticker scrolled, delays lifting across the Midwest. Flights resuming tonight. May's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out, thumbed open the screen. A new message from Leighton waited, I'll be waiting on the tarmac, like the old days. She looked out the cafe window again. The storm had eased just enough for lights to peek through the flurries. May took a final sip of cocoa, let the cinnamon fill her breath, and stood calm, collected, steady as ever. The sun broke gently over Richmond Airport, sending golden shafts of light through a thinning veil of clouds. Snow from the night before had frozen in thin, glinting crusts along the edges of the tarmac, but the runways had been cleared, the de-icing crews already in motion. Inside the terminal, only a few travelers milled about, bundled in scarves and sleepiness. Holiday jazz played softly overhead, mellow saxophone over strings, carrying a tune more wistful than merry. May Thomas walked through the entrance with steady steps, her frayed duffel slung over one shoulder. The old Air Force patch faded but visible in the morning light. A red scarf hung around her neck, the kind of thick woolen gift no longer sold in stores. It had a small tear at the seam and a tag that barely read, Love R. Natalie met her at the security gate. We've got you upgraded, she said with a smile. First class. Courtesy of, well, everyone. May shook her head gently. Coach is fine. But Coach May repeated, eyes twinkling. I like legroom earned, not handed out. Natalie grinned. Yes, ma'am. Jason was waiting near gate B2 beside a small escort team in dress uniforms. He straightened as May approached. Morning, he said. Figured you'd say yes. May didn't reply. Instead, she looked out the wide terminal window at the tarmac. A military transport had just pulled up, its wide silhouette cutting through the fog, its lights blinking like quiet beacons. The engines powered down slowly. A figure stepped out onto the ramp. General Leighton, dressed in a long coat, stepped into the light. He spotted her immediately. He saluted. May took 2 steps forward, straightened her spine, and returned the gesture, crisp, clean, and unmistakable. A few distant flashbulbs went off. Someone near the edge of the terminal had lifted a camera. May turned her head slightly. Put those away, she said so softly. This isn't that kind of story. Leighton strode toward her, then slowed. They wanted a red carpet, he said, amused. I told them you'd trip me on purpose. Still might, May replied. He smiled. They want a speech. She raised an eyebrow. Only if there's coffee. He held up a thermos with a familiar silver lid. Black, no sugar, like always. May took it without comment, then looked at Jason. Tell Natalie thank you. Jason gave a short nod, visibly moved. Leighton extended a hand toward the jet bridge. Shall we? They walked side by side toward the plane. The boarding ramp creaked lightly beneath their steps. Inside the aircraft, it was quiet, polished, clean. The kind of flight meant for ceremony, not tourism. May settled by a window in the third row. She pulled her scarf tighter, opened the thermos, and sipped. The coffee was hot and strong. As the engines rumbled to life, she looked out the small window. The horizon was turning amber. Snow still drifted lightly, but the sky was clear enough now finally. The plane taxied slowly. She could feel it, the rhythm, the weight, the memory of lift and balance and trust. Leighton leaned slightly toward her from across the aisle. Still remember the call sign? May didn't look at him. She just closed her eyes, smiled, and murmured. Nightbird cleared for takeoff. The wheels lifted from the ground. Above the clouds, the light widened. May hummed just under her breath the old Air Force hymn. Her fingers tapped lightly against the armrest in rhythm. Far below, the terminal faded from view, but not the people inside. Somewhere across town, on the outskirts of a snow-dusted neighborhood, a car pulled up slowly to a brick house with twinkling lights in every window. Oliver Brent stepped out, adjusting his coat. He stood on the porch for several long seconds, staring at the door. It opened before he knocked. Sarah stood there, older, tired perhaps, but smiling through tears. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. Before he could say a word, she stepped forward and hugged him tightly. He held on. Back in the sky, May looked ahead, calm and still. The escort pilot's voice crackled over comms from the cockpit, Nightbird en route. Wind steady, all clear. And on the screen, just before it faded to black, appeared one final line. Sometimes heroes don't need medals, just a seat on the plane. The airport was quiet again by sunrise, but something lingered in the air. Something softer than snow and stronger than steel. Sometimes the people we overlook carry the deepest maps of where we've been and what it means to be human. Kindness doesn't always arrive with fanfare. It might come in a cup of cocoa, a shared charger, or a hand steady enough to fly through storms. And when we let go of judgment, we often discover the quiet heroes among us, those who walk beside us, with no need to be seen. So the next time you pass a stranger in line, pause. Listen. You never know whose story you might be standing next to.